After 11 months of giving my life to the job, my boss told me I wasn't a team player. But when I handed her my resignation, she asked for just 5 minutes. I didn't go alone. My name is Amber Collins. I'm 30 years old, a data analyst by trade. And until recently, I was the most dedicated employee at Navora Insights in downtown Chicago. This isn't a story about how hard work pays off. It's a story about how I learned that loyalty in corporate America is often a one-way street, and how I finally decided to make it a two-way intersection. It started innocently enough. I was thrilled when Rebecca Lang was promoted to head of strategy. She had a reputation for being brilliant, demanding, but fair. And most importantly, a champion for talented women in the company. I was her first hire, and she made me feel special from day one. Amber, I picked you because I see something in you that reminds me of myself at your age, she told me during our first one-on-one meeting. I think we could make an incredible team together. I beamed with pride. Rebecca was everything I aspired to be: confident, articulate, impeccably dressed, and commanding respect in every room she entered. At 38, she had already climbed higher than most women twice her age in our industry. Having her single me out felt like winning the career lottery. I need someone I can count on, she continued, leaning forward across her desk. Someone who understands that in this business, we sometimes have to make sacrifices to get ahead. Are you that person, Amber? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. I'm ready to do whatever it takes. I meant it. I had just ended a relationship that was going nowhere. My apartment was a 10-minute walk from the office, and I had always been the type to throw myself into work. This was my chance to prove myself, to really make something of my career. How hard could it be? The first month was manageable. 50-hour weeks, some late nights, a few early mornings. Nothing I couldn't handle. Rebecca was impressed with my work ethic and analytical skills. She started inviting me to client meetings, asking for my input, showcasing my analysis to senior leadership. I felt valued, important. By month 2, the workload intensified. Rebecca had secured 3 major clients. And somehow, I was the lead analyst on all of them. My days started at 7 a.m. and often didn't end until 9 or 10 p.m. I began bringing my laptop home on weekends. It wasn't sustainable, but I told myself it was temporary, just until we got through this busy period. You're doing amazing work, Amber, Rebecca said during one of our check-ins. I've been telling everyone how lucky I am to have you on my team. This is how careers are made. Her praise was like fuel. I worked harder, stayed later, came in earlier. My friends started commenting that they never saw me anymore. I missed my book club, canceled dinner plans, stopped going to my weekly yoga class. I told myself it was worth it. I was building something. By month 4, I was regularly working 70 to 75 hours a week. My apartment had become little more than a place to sleep and shower. I ate most of my meals at my desk. The cleaning service I'd hired was the only reason my plants were still alive. I need you to run point on the Axion presentation this weekend, Rebecca told me one Friday afternoon in June. It was already 6 p.m., and I had plans to attend my father's 60th birthday dinner the following evening, the first family event I'd committed to in months. This weekend, I asked, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. I actually have my dad's birthday dinner tomorrow night. I mentioned it a few weeks ago. Rebecca's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened slightly. Amber, the Axion account is worth 8 figures. You know how important this is for the firm, for both of us. I wouldn't ask if there was any other option. Could we perhaps get support from Tim's team? I suggested, referencing another data group that often collaborated with us. Tim's people don't have your attention to detail, she said dismissively. Besides, this is your project. You've built the foundation. No one else can finalize it the way you can. I felt simultaneously flattered and trapped. I called my parents that night and told them I couldn't make it. My father tried to hide his disappointment, but I could hear it in his voice. I promised to make it up to him. I didn't know then that this would become a pattern, a promise made and broken repeatedly as work consumed more and more of my life. I spent that entire weekend at the office, sleeping just 4 hours each night on the small couch in our break room. The presentation was flawless. The client was impressed. Rebecca was ecstatic. "This is why you're my star, Amber," she said, clinking her champagne glass against mine in her office after the client signed. "No one else would have delivered like this. I'm going to make sure you're rewarded when promotion time comes around." That promise of recognition, of advancement, of finally reaping the rewards of my sacrifice became my lifeline. I clung to it through missed holidays, canceled vacations, and 75-hour work weeks that stretched into months. I missed Thanksgiving with my family because Rebecca needed a comprehensive analysis of a potential acquisition target before the market opened on Monday. I worked through Christmas because a major client was doing their year-end review and needed our input immediately. I canceled a trip to Mexico with friends during spring break because Rebecca insisted we couldn't meet a deadline without me. Each time, Rebecca would thank me profusely. Each time, she would remind me that my dedication wasn't going unnoticed. Each time, she would hint at the promotion that surely awaited me. "You're building equity," she would say. "Every hour you put in now is an investment in your future." I believed her. I had to believe her. The alternative, that I was sacrificing my life for nothing, was too painful to consider. The warning signs were there. Of course, I just chose to ignore them. There was the time Rebecca took credit for my analysis during a board presentation. When I mentioned it later, she laughed it off. "That's just how it works, Amber. I'm the face of the department, but I always make sure people know who's behind the scenes." There was the junior analyst, Marcus, who Rebecca hired without consulting me, despite my supposed role as her second in command. When I asked why I wasn't involved in the interview process, she said, "I didn't want to add to your workload. You seemed stressed." There was the client dinner where Rebecca introduced me as her assistant rather than her senior analyst. When I brought it up afterward, she claimed it was a slip of the tongue. But the most telling sign came 9 months into our working relationship. When performance review season arrived, I had been killing myself for 3/4 of a year. I had missed birthdays, holidays, and countless hours of sleep. I had given Rebecca and Navora Insights everything I had. In return, I expected recognition, the promotion Rebecca had been hinting at for months. I walked into my review meeting confident. The numbers spoke for themselves. Client satisfaction was up, revenue from my projects had increased by 38%, and I had personally brought in 2 new accounts. Rebecca had me prepare most of the department's performance reviews, but she kept mine private, to make it a surprise, she said. I took that as another good sign. The meeting started well enough. Rebecca praised my work ethic, my analytical skills, my attention to detail. But as she continued, I noticed she wasn't meeting my eyes. She kept glancing at her computer screen, at her notes, at the window behind me, anywhere but at my face. "You've certainly put in the hours," she said, fidgeting with her pen. "And your technical skills are beyond question." I waited for the but. There's always a but when someone won't look you in the eye. But she continued right on cue. "Leadership isn't just about hard work and technical expertise, it's about inspiring others, building relationships, seeing the big picture." My stomach dropped. I knew where this was going. "I think you need more time to develop those skills before we can consider a promotion," she concluded. "Your performance rating is meets expectations." Meets expectations. After 9 months of 75-hour weeks, after sacrificing my personal life, my health, my relationships, after delivering everything she had ever asked for, and more, I met expectations. "I don't understand," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You've been telling me for months that I was exceeding expectations. You said I was your star." Rebecca finally looked at me then, her expression a carefully constructed mask of sympathy. "Amber, you're a valuable member of the team. But being a manager requires more than just putting in hours. It requires a certain presence, a leadership quality that comes with time and experience." "What specifically do I need to improve?" I asked, trying to focus on concrete actions rather than the crushing disappointment threatening to overwhelm me. Rebecca gave me a patronizing smile. "It's not something that can be quantified or listed in bullet points. It's an intangible quality. You'll develop it over time. I left that meeting in a daze. For the first time in 9 months, I left the office at 5 p.m. I walked home in a fog of betrayal and disillusionment. Everything I had believed about my job, about Rebecca, about my future at Navora Insights. It all seemed like a cruel joke. That night, I cried for the first time in years. I cried for the birthdays I had missed, for the relationships I had neglected, for the life I had put on hold for a promise that turned out to be empty. I cried until there were no tears left. And then I did something I should have done months earlier. I started taking stock of my situation. I pulled out my laptop and began documenting everything. Every project I had worked on, every deadline I had met, every email Rebecca had sent praising my work, every client interaction, every weekend I had worked, every holiday I had sacrificed. I created spreadsheets, saved emails, took screenshots. If my work wasn't being fairly evaluated, I would create my own evaluation with evidence no one could dispute. What emerged from this exercise was even more disturbing than I had initially realized. Over the past 9 months, I had handled 68% of our department's client deliverables. I had responded to 80% of client emails, many of them addressed to Rebecca, but forwarded to me with a quick, "Can you handle this?" I had created every presentation, written every report, built every model. Rebecca had merely presented them, often with minimal changes, sometimes without even reading them thoroughly. More surprisingly, I discovered that several of our major clients had begun reaching out to me directly rather than going through Rebecca. They valued my insights, my responsiveness, my attention to detail. They trusted me more than they trusted her. And yet, according to my performance review, I merely met expectations. I didn't quit immediately. That would have been impulsive. And if there's one thing being a data analyst teaches you, it's not to make decisions without sufficient information. Instead, I began to strategize. First, I adjusted my working hours. Not dramatically, I couldn't afford to be accused of slacking off, but enough to reclaim some semblance of a personal life. I started leaving at 6 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. I stopped working every weekend. I declined non-essential meetings that were scheduled before 8 a.m. or after 5 p.m. Rebecca noticed. Of course. "Everything okay, Amber?" she asked one evening as I packed up my laptop at 6:15. "You've been leaving early lately?" "Just trying to achieve better work-life balance," I replied with a casual smile. My performance review made me realize I need to develop other aspects of my life to grow as a leader. She couldn't argue with that, not when she had just used similar language to deny me a promotion. She nodded and said something about how important balance was, though I noted she made no move to pack up her own things, despite it being well past dinner time. What Rebecca didn't know is that I had started applying for other jobs, not actively interviewing yet, but putting out feelers, updating my resume, reconnecting with former colleagues. I was preparing for a future that didn't include Navora Insights or Rebecca Lang. And then something unexpected happened. I received a call from Kevin Matthews, the CEO of TerraLoom Technologies, one of our biggest clients. I had worked extensively on their account, analyzing their market position and helping develop their 5-year growth strategy. "Amber," Kevin said when I answered, "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "Not at all," I replied, stepping away from my desk and into an empty conference room. "What can I do for you, Kevin?" "Actually, it's about what I might be able to do for you," he said. "I've been impressed with your work over the past year. You have a remarkable ability to translate complex data into actionable insights. We're creating a new position, Director of Data Strategy, and I think you'd be perfect for it." I nearly dropped the phone. "I'm flattered," I managed to say. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity." "It would be a significant step up from your current role," Kevin continued. "More responsibility, more visibility, and of course, appropriate compensation. We'd start you at $175,000, plus bonus and equity. That was nearly double my current salary. "I know you must have a good thing going at Navora," he added when I didn't immediately respond. "But I thought it was worth at least having the conversation. Would you be open to meeting formally to discuss the position?" Absolutely, I said, trying to keep the excitement from my voice. I'd love to learn more. We arranged to meet for lunch the following week at a restaurant far enough from my office that I wouldn't risk running into anyone from Navora. As I ended the call, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. The lunch with Kevin exceeded my expectations. The role he described was challenging but exciting, leading a team of analysts, working directly with the executive committee, helping shape the company's strategic direction. It was everything I had hoped my career at Navora would become, but with better hours, better pay, and better recognition. We value work-life balance here, Kevin told me as we finished our meal. I don't want burned-out employees. I want people who are energized, creative, and fully present when they're working. I nearly laughed at the contrast with my current situation. Kevin must have noticed my expression. I know Rebecca runs a tight ship, he said carefully. We've appreciated the quality of work from your team, but I've also noticed that you seem to be the one delivering most of the actual value. What makes you say that? I asked, curious about how visible this was to clients. Kevin smiled. Amber, I've received emails from you at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. I've watched you field questions Rebecca couldn't answer during presentations. I've seen how clients at multi-firm meetings gravitate toward you rather than her. It's not hard to connect the dots. I left that lunch with a formal offer letter and a request to give my decision within 2 weeks. I also left with a newfound sense of my own worth. If Kevin had noticed my contributions, had valued them enough to offer me a director-level position, perhaps other clients had as well. Acting on a hunch, I reached out to 2 other clients who had hinted at potential opportunities in previous conversations. Both responded enthusiastically. By the end of the week, I had 3 solid job offers, all for positions above my current level, all with better compensation and more reasonable expectations regarding work hours. I had options. For the first time since joining Navora, I wasn't dependent on Rebecca's evaluation of my worth. I could walk away at any time. And I would land on my feet, better than on my feet. I would land several rungs higher on the career ladder. But before I made any decisions, there was one more thing I needed to do. I scheduled a meeting with Megan from HR to discuss some concerns about departmental practices. I didn't mention Rebecca specifically in my meeting request, but given that she was the head of our department, the implication was clear. The meeting was set for Thursday afternoon. I spent Wednesday night organizing my documentation, the emails, the time logs, the project trackers, everything that demonstrated the extent of my contributions and the imbalance in our department. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was thinking about the analysts who would come after me, the ones Rebecca would exploit next if her behavior went unchecked. Thursday morning, Rebecca called me into her office first thing. "Close the door, please," she said, her voice unusually tense. I did as she asked, then took a seat across from her desk. "Megan from HR mentioned you have a meeting with her this afternoon," Rebecca said, getting straight to the point. "May I ask what that's about?" I kept my expression neutral. "I have some concerns I'd like to discuss with HR." "What kind of concerns?" Rebecca pressed, leaning forward. "Because if they're related to our department, I would hope you'd come to me first. That's what team players do. Amber, they address issues directly." The irony of her invoking team spirit wasn't lost on me. After months of taking advantage of my dedication, after denying me a well-deserved promotion, she had the audacity to lecture me about being a team player. "I've tried to address these issues with you, Rebecca," I said calmly. "I've mentioned my workload, the hours, the distribution of responsibilities. Nothing has changed." Rebecca's expression hardened. "Is this about your performance review? Because I was very clear about why you weren't ready for promotion. If you're going to HR to try to circumvent that decision..." "This isn't about the promotion," I interrupted. "This is about a pattern of behavior that I believe violates company policy regarding working hours, proper credit for work, and ethical treatment of employees." Rebecca stared at me for a long moment, then let out a sharp laugh. "You're serious? After everything I've done for you, you're going to HR with some imagined grievances?" "Everything you've done for me," I repeated, struggling to maintain my composure. Rebecca, I've worked 75-hour weeks for nearly a year. I've missed holidays, birthdays, vacations. I've handled the majority of our client deliverables while you've taken the credit. What exactly have you done for me? I've mentored you, she shot back. I've included you in high-level meetings. I've given you exposure to clients and executives you wouldn't have had otherwise. I've been grooming you for advancement. No, I said, standing up. You've been exploiting me. There's a difference. I turned to leave, but Rebecca's voice stopped me. If you go to that meeting, you're burning a bridge. Amber, I know people throughout this industry. I can make sure you never work at a top firm again. I looked back at her, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. She was afraid. Beneath the threats and the indignation, Rebecca Lang was terrified of being exposed. I'll take my chances, I said, and walked out. I went straight to my desk and did something I should have done long ago. I wrote my resignation letter. It was brief, professional, and effective immediately. I had more than enough unused vacation days to cover the standard 2-week notice period. Then I went to my meeting with HR. Megan listened attentively as I outlined my concerns, occasionally taking notes but mostly just absorbing what I was saying. I presented my evidence methodically, the emails, the time logs, the project distributions. I explained how Rebecca had systematically taken credit for my work while overloading me with responsibilities. I detailed the promises she had made and broken regarding my advancement. When I finished, Megan was silent for a moment. This is concerning, she said finally. Very concerning. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. Amber, we take these kinds of allegations seriously. I know it's my word against hers, I said. That's why I've documented everything so thoroughly. Yes, your documentation is impressive, Megan replied, glancing at the folder I had provided. But I want to be clear, this isn't just your word against hers. We've had other concerns raised about Rebecca's management style. Nothing as detailed as what you've presented, but enough to establish a pattern. That surprised me. I'd been so consumed with my own situation that I hadn't considered Rebecca might be treating others similarly. What happens now? I asked. We'll conduct an investigation, Megan said. We'll speak with Rebecca, review your documentation, interview other team members. It will take some time. I nodded, then slid my resignation letter across the desk. I won't be here for the outcome. This is my resignation, effective immediately. I have unused vacation days to cover the notice period. Megan looked genuinely shocked. Amber, I wish you'd reconsider. If what you're saying is true, and your documentation certainly suggests it is, there could be significant changes coming, changes that might address your concerns. I appreciate that, I said. But I've received an offer for a position that better aligns with my career goals and values. It's time for me to move on. Megan reluctantly accepted my resignation, asking me to return to my desk while she processed the paperwork. As I walked back to my department, I felt lighter than I had in months. The decision was made. I was free. I began cleaning out my desk, placing personal items in a small box I kept under my desk for this very purpose. I wasn't being dramatic. I simply hadn't wanted anything to delay my departure when the time came. Rebecca emerged from her office just as I was unplugging my phone charger. What are you doing? She demanded, looking at the box on my desk. I've resigned, I said simply. Effective immediately. I'm just collecting my things. Rebecca's face went pale. You what? Resigned, I repeated. I've given my letter to HR. They're processing it now. Rebecca glanced around the office, aware that our conversation was attracting attention from other team members. Let's discuss this in my office, she said, her voice low and urgent. There's nothing to discuss, I replied, continuing to pack my things. My decision is made. Amber, please, she said, a note of desperation creeping into her voice. Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I ask. 5 minutes of your time. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Rebecca Lang, the woman I had once admired so much, now seemed small and pathetic. She wasn't concerned about losing me as a valuable team member. She was concerned about losing her workhorse, The person who made her look good, who did the work she took credit for. Fine, I said after a moment. 5 minutes, but not alone. Rebecca frowned. What do you mean? If we're going to have this conversation, I want witnesses. I explained. I'll meet you in the third-floor conference room in 15 minutes. I'm bringing some people with me. Before she could respond, I picked up my box and walked to the elevator. I had calls to make. 15 minutes later, I entered the conference room. Rebecca was already there, pacing nervously. She stopped when she saw me. Then her eyes widened as 4 other people filed in behind me. James Nelson, the CEO of Navora Insights. Megan from HR. Daniel Cooper, our Client Services Director, and Sarah Chen, our Legal Counsel. What is this? Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You asked for 5 minutes. I replied calmly. I thought it would be most efficient if everyone who needs to hear this is present. James looked between Rebecca and me, clearly confused. Someone want to tell me what's going on here? Amber has resigned, Megan explained. She's also raised some serious concerns about Rebecca's management practices. What concerns? James asked, turning to me. I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for. I opened my laptop and connected it to the conference room display. For the past 11 months, I've been working an average of 75 hours per week under Rebecca's direction. I began, showing a spreadsheet with my time logs. During that time, I've handled 68% of our department's client deliverables, responded to 80% of client emails, and created every presentation and report that has gone out under Rebecca's name. I clicked through my evidence methodically. The emails Rebecca had sent at all hours expecting immediate responses. The projects assigned over holidays and weekends. The client communications showing how much of Rebecca's work I had actually done. Rebecca has consistently taken credit for my work while overloading me with responsibilities. I continued. She promised me advancement opportunities in exchange for these sacrifices, then denied me a promotion during my recent performance review, claiming I lacked leadership qualities. I pulled up the email Rebecca had sent after the Axion presentation, the one I had worked on through my father's birthday weekend. This is why you're my star, Amber. I read aloud. No one else would have delivered like this. I'm going to make sure you're rewarded when promotion time comes around. Then I showed my performance review, with its meets expectations rating and vague criticisms about lacking leadership qualities. The room was silent as I continued presenting my evidence. Rebecca sat frozen, her face a mask of barely contained panic. James and Daniel exchanged concerned glances. Megan took notes furiously. Sarah, our legal counsel, watched with a grave expression. Finally, I came to my last slide, an email I'd received that morning from Kevin Matthews at Terraloom Technologies. Due to ongoing leadership concerns at Navora Insights, specifically within the strategy department, we are terminating our pending agreement for the Q3 market analysis project. While we have been impressed with the quality of work produced by certain team members, particularly Amber Collins, we cannot continue a relationship where there appears to be a disconnect between who does the work and who receives the credit. We will be moving our business elsewhere unless significant changes are made to address these issues. I turned to face the room. Terraloom isn't the only client who has expressed these concerns. I've spoken with representatives from Axion and Globetech as well. Both have indicated they are reconsidering their relationships with Navora based on similar observations. James looked stricken. Terraloom, Axion, and Globetech represented nearly 40% of our firm's revenue. Why didn't you come to me with this sooner? He asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. I tried to address these issues with Rebecca directly. I replied. When that failed, I went to HR. But ultimately, I've decided that the best course of action for me personally is to accept a position elsewhere. Where? Rebecca asked suddenly, finding her voice. Who would hire you without a recommendation from your direct supervisor? I met her gaze steadily. I've accepted the position of Director of Data Strategy at Terraloom Technologies. I start next Monday. Rebecca's face contorted with fury. You've been planning this all along. You've been undermining me with our clients. turning them against me. No, Rebecca, I said calmly. You did that yourself when you built a reputation on my work while treating me as disposable. The clients figured it out on their own. James held up a hand to silence Rebecca before she could respond. Sarah, Megan, I think we need to discuss this situation privately. Daniel, please stay as well. Rebecca, wait in my office. Amber. He trailed off, looking at me with a mixture of regret and respect. Amber, I apologize for what you've experienced here. Clearly, we've failed you as an organization. Is there anything we could do to convince you to reconsider your resignation? I appreciated the gesture, but my mind was made up. Thank you, James. But no. I've accepted another position that I'm excited about. It's time for me to move on. James nodded. I understand. Before you go, would you be willing to provide more details about the client concerns you mentioned? We need to address the situation immediately to prevent further damage. Of course, I said. I'll send you everything I have. As I gathered my things to leave, Rebecca made one last desperate attempt. Amber, you can't do this, she hissed. You're making a huge mistake. You need me. My recommendation. My connections. No, Rebecca. I interrupted. I don't need you. I never did. What I needed was a mentor who valued my contributions and respected my time. What I needed was a leader who lifted others up instead of standing on their shoulders. You were never that person. I walked out of the conference room with my head held high, leaving Rebecca to face the consequences of her actions. The aftermath was swift and severe. Rebecca was terminated that same day. James called me personally to inform me of the decision and to ask if I would reconsider staying on, this time with a substantial promotion and a significant raise. I declined politely, but firmly. My path was set. What I didn't expect was what happened next. 4 of my former colleagues, Marcus, Priya, Dev, and Erica, reached out to me within days of my departure. All had experienced similar treatment under Rebecca's management. All were looking for a way out. And all had valuable skills that would be an asset to TerraLoom's new data strategy team. After discussing it with Kevin, I extended offers to all 4. Within a month, we had established a tight-knit, highly efficient team that worked collaboratively, respected each other's time and contributions, and still managed to deliver exceptional results, all while working reasonable hours. My new role at TerraLoom challenged me in ways my position at Navora never had. I was leading presentations, developing strategy, mentoring junior analysts. I was doing all the things Rebecca had claimed I wasn't capable of, and I was thriving. My team respected me, not because I demanded 75-hour weeks from them, but because I valued their contributions, protected their time, and gave them credit for their work. Kevin was true to his word about work-life balance. I rarely worked more than 50 hours a week, and those extra hours were by choice, not coercion. I reconnected with friends, resumed my yoga practice, joined a new book club. I visited my parents regularly and made it to every family event. I even started dating again. 6 months after leaving Navora, I ran into James Nelson at an industry conference. He greeted me warmly and asked if we could grab coffee. You've built quite a reputation in a short time, he said as we sat down with our drinks. TerraLoom's market analyses have become the gold standard in the industry. Thank you, I replied. I have a great team. James nodded thoughtfully. That's what I hear. You've managed to create something special over there. He paused, then added, Rebecca hasn't been able to find another position in the industry. No one will hire her after what happened at Navora. I felt a momentary twinge of sympathy, quickly replaced by the memory of all those 75-hour weeks, all those broken promises. That's unfortunate, I said neutrally. How has Navora been doing? We've recovered somewhat, James admitted. Axion stayed with us after I personally assured them of changes in our management practices. GlobeTech left but has recently shown interest in returning. TerraLoom, well, he smiled ruefully. I don't expect we'll get that business back anytime soon. Probably not, I agreed. I want you to know that what happened with Rebecca, it wasn't representative of our values at Navora. James said earnestly. We've made significant changes to prevent something like that from happening again. And if you ever want to come back. I smiled and shook my head. I appreciate the offer, James, but I'm very happy where I am. As I walked away from that conversation, I felt the final piece of my old life fall away. I had moved on completely, building something new and better from the ashes of my experience at Navora. A week later, I received a text message from an unknown number. Amber, it's Rebecca. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to talk to you. Please, just coffee. 20 minutes of your time. I'm begging you. I stared at the message for a long time, conflicting emotions swirling within me. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue moving forward without looking back. But another part of me was curious. What could Rebecca possibly have to say after all this time? What could she possibly want from me? After careful consideration, I typed a response. No, Rebecca. There's nothing to discuss. Please don't contact me again. Her reply came almost immediately. I understand why you feel that way, but I've changed. I've had time to reflect on my behavior, on how I treated you and others. I want to apologize in person. Please, Amber. I'm struggling to find work. No one will hire me without a reference. And the story of what happened at Navora has spread throughout the industry. You're the only one who can help me. And there it was. The real reason for her reaching out. Not to apologize, not to make amends, but to use me once again. She didn't see me as a person who deserved respect. She saw me as a means to an end, a tool to be utilized for her benefit. I didn't respond, but I did think about her situation. Despite everything Rebecca had done, I didn't wish her to be permanently unemployable. That kind of vindictiveness wasn't in my nature. But I also wasn't going to lie about my experience working with her. I wasn't going to help her reestablish herself in a position where she could exploit others the way she had exploited me. In the end, I heard through industry channels that Rebecca had taken a mid-level position at a small firm in another city, a significant step down from her role at Navora, but a fresh start nonetheless. I hoped she had indeed learned from her mistakes, though I had my doubts. As for me, I continued to build my team and my reputation at TerraLoom. We expanded from 5 people to 15, then to 25. We moved from simple market analyses to complex predictive models that drove strategic decisions throughout the company. Kevin promoted me to Vice President of Data Strategy, with a seat on the executive committee. My story isn't one with a dramatic climax or a Hollywood ending. There was no screaming match, no cinematic moment of triumph, just a quiet realization of my own worth. A methodical gathering of evidence, and a calm, deliberate walk away from a toxic situation. Sometimes I think about who I might have become if I had stayed at Navora. If I had continued to allow Rebecca to exploit my work ethic and dedication. Would I have eventually become like her, taking credit for others' work, making promises I never intended to keep, building my success on the sacrifices of those beneath me? The thought terrifies me. 2 years after leaving Navora, I received a LinkedIn request from Rebecca. Her profile showed she had moved up from that mid-level position to director level at the same small firm. Her message was brief. Amber, I hope you're well. I've been following your success at TerraLoom. Impressive work. Perhaps we could reconnect sometime. I never responded, not out of anger or resentment, but because I had nothing to say to her. Rebecca was part of my past, a chapter in my story that had closed. I had learned what I needed to from that experience, about corporate politics, about the importance of documenting my contributions, about standing up for myself, but, most importantly, about the kind of leader I wanted to be. At TerraLoom, I built a department where work-life balance wasn't just a buzzword, but a lived reality. Where credit was given where it was due. Where junior analysts weren't expected to sacrifice their personal lives for vague promises of future advancement. Where success was measured not just in revenue and client satisfaction, but in team retention and employee well-being. I think about that year of 75-hour weeks sometimes, the birthdays I missed, The friendships that withered, the constant exhaustion. It seems like another lifetime now. A time when I believed that sacrifice without recognition was somehow noble. That exploitation was a necessary step on the ladder to success. I know better now. True success isn't built on the broken promises and broken spirits of those who trust you. It's built on mutual respect, on recognition of value, on collaborative effort toward shared goals. It's built on the understanding that people are not resources to be depleted, but assets to be nurtured. I'm 32 now. My team at Terraloom has become known throughout the industry not just for the quality of our work, but for our innovative approach to work-life balance. We've been featured in business magazines and case studies. Other companies have started to adopt our practices. The industry is slowly changing, and I like to think I've played a small part in that change. Last month, my father celebrated his 62nd birthday. I was there, present and engaged, my laptop nowhere in sight. As we cut the cake, he put his arm around me and said, "I'm so proud of who you've become, Amber." "So am I, Dad. So am I." Because the best revenge isn't destruction, it's building a life that no one else can take credit for.